Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and welcome to episode 2 of my new series entitled, What Were You Thinking? And today it's really, what were you thinking? I'm delighted to have Paul Gero with me. Paul has been a working photographer for most of his life. It's a really interesting story. He's shot for the Chicago Tribune, Time, Sports Illustrated, blah, 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 blah. I mean, this is a heavyweight guy. Also, again, you're one of the nicest guys. And now he is a portrait photographer, a wedding photographer, and you do a lot of education.
I do. And it's funny that life takes a lot of twists and turns. And if you would have said to me when I got out of school 35 years ago that, oh, when you're your age now, you're going to be doing portraits, weddings, you're going to be married to a South African, you're going to be living in California, you're going to have 2 little kids, 12 and 8, and oh yeah, you're going to be using cameras that used to be made by the company that made Discmans and Walkmans. I would have laughed.
That is
on
fantastic.
All those counts.
So this is perfect because the subject of today's What Were You Thinking is you're a teenager, you're in high school, you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you decided to become a photographer. So Paul, what were you thinking?
Well, it was like I always had this belief, and my parents always supported it. It was like, you got to do what you love.
Yeah.
And when I was a 12-year-old kid, I found photography through a Boy Scout merit badge, and I instantly, like every kid who ever becomes an adult photographer says, I fell in love with it, which is true, I did. And I thought, this is what I want to do because it's just, like telling stories. It gives you a reason to be on the sidelines of a football game. It gives you front row access to life that you never got just being somebody who was back, who wasn't with a camera or wasn't with a notepad or anything like journalism. It was always the front row seat. And it also made me feel a little special because it was like something that people knew me by. It was like, oh, that's Paul, he's a photographer.
But, that sounds very hip. It does sound very hip.
But it was more about the fact that I just liked the challenge. I loved to draw as a child, but I wasn't very good at it. But photography was this really almost like a sense of drawing. Like Cartier-Bresson used to talk about, like that being able to see composition very fleeting and fast and almost sketching with your camera, and that's kind of what it became.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I loved photojournalism because it was a walk into people's lives all the time. Every day was different. Whether you're doing sports one day, portraits the next, news, documentary projects, every one of them was a different way to work. But they all kind of were going towards the same end, which was to try to communicate and make a great, heartfelt, emotional photograph.
Well, that sounds very smooth, but you and I have talked about this before.
Right.
And there are a couple of things that are interesting. First, I love your story about that flippin' merit badge.
Oh, jeez. And flippin' is right, because the book used to be two-sided, like it had one side was movie making and the other side was stills, and literally I was flipping the book back and forth for about 2 weeks trying to decide if I was going to do stills or movies. Now my dad had a Bell & Howell 8mm and my mom had a 1955 poor man's rangefinder, as her boss would call it. It was a screw mount Leica one, so it had a...
Wait, was it a screw mount Leica? Or
no, it was not. It was called a Futura. And a copy.
So this was one of these post-war copies,
right,
when the Allies made German patents free to everyone, when the Soviet Union basically disassembled plants, and not in the case of Leica, but in the case of Zeiss Icon, and just took it back. Yeah. So that's one thing. So I know that there was a struggle. I wouldn't call it existential, but you had a struggle saying, am I a photographer? Am I a filmmaker? And because you had a choice, you made a choice, and you went this way.
So Spielberg flipped it to the movies.
Yes.
And I flipped it for stills.
Well, there wouldn't have been enough room for the two of you, I guess. So that's good.
But the thing is it always, when the Sony cameras came out, and I know this, I don't want to make it a brand for a thing, but it made shooting video easier, the physical act of video easier. Mirrorless does that in general.
Yeah.
But it made me realize that, oh yeah, there was that side of me, that itch I've always wanted to scratch, that I wasn't really able to do it.
So as an old man with really short hair, what little you have left, just like me, you decided to come back to your first love. But I want to go back to what you were thinking when you were looking at the rest of your life. You're getting at the end of high school, you've got college in front of you, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And you were working. I mean, you weren't just sitting at home eating Cheetos.
I knew I was going to school. I had been accepted for college, so I had a summer job between graduation and my freshman year in college. And it was at probably the best place for a summer job in the town, and it was a town of about 4,000 people in Wisconsin, and it was a factory that assembled.
See, I knew he had a Midwest accent.
Yeah, I'm a Midwesterner, I'm a cheesehead.
Yeah.
And it was like a factory that assembled hydraulic jacks. And it's an honorable profession, they're still there, they make a great product, but I knew before that summer was over that I needed to do something else, because I couldn't ever do that for a living. And not to knock anybody who does it.
No, of course not.
I just knew that that wasn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
And I actually quit my job 2 weeks or almost 3 weeks early because I was going out of my mind. And I just felt like I couldn't do it. I felt like I would just, rather drive spikes through my eyes. So.
Oh, I understand. My utensil is a fork.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're in college. You figured out one thing that you don't want to do.
Right.
How did you get to this?
Well, I was writing, and it's so ironic that you would ask me this question, because the person who was responsible for me really getting back into photography, like really seriously, is at this conference, David Burnett. There was a book called The Best of Photojournalism 5, published by the University of Missouri Press. It was a compilation of the awards of the PPA and NPPA POY Pictures of the Year. David, in 1979, was Magazine Photographer of the Year. And in that spring, the book came out, and on the cover was this photograph from Iran that he made of these women at a rally for the Ayatollah. And these women are all wearing hooded, keffiyehs, and there's one woman with binoculars, and the rest of them are just this beautiful graphic face, but then there's that hint of the modern in that. And I remember being in the library at school, and it literally stopped me in my tracks, and I saw that, and I said, what is that? Went over, picked it up. I was right in the midst of finals, so I should have been studying. But what I did was I went back into the library, and I just sat down, and for 2 hours I got lost in that book. And that's all I wanted to do, and his work stood out to me in that book. Yes, he won, but what I really loved about David was his versatility. He could do world news like Iran. He could do like the Pope's coverage. He could do feature coverage on like the Yankees. One of the Yankees players' kid was throwing the ball around at Parent Day or something like that, and he made this cute sequence. And I mean, his work had heart, and it had soul, and it was also, he was a guy who went to a small college as well, and I was at a small college.
You could relate.
And he had a dream to see the world, and I did too. And so it's ironic that David is here, because he's been somebody that I've looked up to. And when I first met him, of course, I felt like a kid meeting Jordan. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm Mr. Burnett. And so we met, and we became friends, and then like we really became friends like in '88 on the campaign trail. We were covering Dukakis together, and we were at 35,000 feet somewhere over Wichita, Kansas at 2 in the afternoon, and we cracked open a beer. And of course, when you're in altitude and you drink a beer, it goes right to your head. So all of a sudden we're getting a little bit looped, and we started doing imitations back and forth, because we both like to do voices. And we just had a blast. And so we were sharing this imitation about I was sharing this imitation I did of one of his colleagues, a French photographer. And I said, hey, David, have you ever heard how Frank says this? And we started sharing that story, and the next thing you know, we've been buddies. So it's really been great. And to see him, because he was one of the reasons I switched to Canon from Nikon, was because Burnett shot Canon.
Oh yeah.
And it was like that L glass, that's why he switched.
I was a Canon shooter for 40 years.
Yeah, I was about there from '86 till 2014.
I started in '73.
Oh, okay.
That's just really sad.
Yes, right.
Well, anyway, so this is a fantastic story. You like baseball.
I do.
You talked to me about the not a utility player,
right,
but the 5-tool player.
Yeah. So the 5-tool player in baseball is a concept that somebody who's really good, who's got skills for throwing the ball, running the bases, hitting for power, hitting for average, and then I can't remember what the last was. Maybe arm strength. And so the ability to throw out somebody running.
Oh, yeah.
Usually not typically a pitcher, but like Mike Trout would be a 5-tool player.
Right. Joe DiMaggio.
Joe DiMaggio. There was a guy from the Rockies drafted out of Long Beach State, and his name was Troy Tulowitzki, and his nickname was 5-tool Tulowitzki. Yeah. So I've always thought about this concept. It just kind of struck me recently that, like a photojournalist has many skills, and they have to be really good at all of them, because if you don't get really good at them all, you're going to be pounding the pavement.
So these were the things, were you thinking about these things back when you were 20-something?
Yeah, I was, but not quite the way I am now. I was thinking about it.
Oh, I hope not.
Well, you know, you think about it differently when you're young. It's like I knew that I could use long lenses very well, but I also knew that I had trouble using wide angle lenses. So I was like, okay, I got to get better at this range, because I knew that if you're a really skilled photographer, you can handle wide angles, normals, and telephotos with equal skill and aplomb. So.
Kind of like a male model from Zoolander being an ambi-turner.
I'm not an ambi-turner. It's a problem I had since I was a baby. I can't turn left.
Go left or right. Yeah. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Paul, it is a pleasure. It's always lovely to see you.
Thanks.
We will be talking frequently.
I hope so.
And thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone.
See you next Zoolander, you.
That Paul.
It's so hot right now.
Hey, baby.
If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation in the comments section below. You guys are just so sharp and so generous. Just wow. Share, create a playlist. Consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, or making a contribution directly via the PayPal link down below. As always, we thank you for it.